Good afternoon, everybody. It's March 29, 2025. It is Saturday. It really is Saturday today. Um, I have some sad news. I don't know if you remember somebody that I mentioned on my channel last year. I guess it was around September. Karen Romero got into an auto accident. Her third auto accident in a year. Her car was totaled. She was hospitalized. She was sent home after 3 days. She fell, sent her back, but instead of sending her back to the hospital, they Baker Act her because of something that she said. Then they put her back in the hospital. She goes home again, and then back in the hospital. And the last time I spoke to her was sometime in October, and she sounded horrible. She was definitely being drugged, but she passed away October 27, 2024. And I've known Karen since the end, or sometime in 2017. I entered the community when I figured out what was going on in March 2017. And I had given my very first testimony to Ella Fraud. And yes, I don't use that loosely. Ella Fraud. I gave my testimony to her, but literally within the next 3 to 6 months, I realized that it was likely a mistake. But nevertheless, I was able to put my first testimony out there because, year after year after year, you lose track of what's going on in your life. There's so much going on all the time, like totally bizarre. It's not a normal life anymore. So I remember after it was posted, Karen, who was also on some of the conference calls, in the chat and everything, we would strike up a conversation and stuff. And she was very intelligent. She could type, very articulate, super intelligent, psychic, spiritual. She was an overall good person. She could be difficult to deal with sometimes. She was a Scorpio. And I think it was her Venus in Scorpio too. So she was a Scorpio. And, she and I have definitely butt heads in the past. Didn't speak maybe for months and then start all over again. And she's extremely helpful to me. So it's deeply disturbing that when I went into my mail today to look at when our last correspondences were, or I should say first correspondences were, all of my correspondence to her from the year 2017, 18, 19, and 20 are missing. And this is what happens to targeted people. I guarantee the criminals were in her apartment where she lived for many years and wiped clean her laptop, stole it, took information, because obviously I was a person who wrote to her frequently. We wrote frequently. So 4 years of my contact information with her is gone. But the criminals, they're not all that bright. They think that that's the only place people keep email. So I kept a folder on Karen. And Karen would sometimes send me information, like an affidavit, which I will attempt to read. It's extremely long. I might have to do it in parts, but she sent me an affidavit. It's dated December 28, 2018. I also have other information from 2018 from her. Roommate information, stalking information, her new apartment, what happened with her shower, her phone numbers, her Idaho email, lithium batteries, what apartment her ex-husband, etc. She was denied service, dental defamation in 2023, her car accident and insurance information in 2023, a book inclusion, psych degree in nursing, and something about her father, something about an Amazon chat. But this affidavit she wrote, and if you're listening, Karen, this information This original affidavit was written to Karen Stewart. From Karen Romero, also known as Goodness 8. Dear Karen, I started this email to you to respond to an email that you sent me a while back telling me it was the travel office you were demoted to and not HR. Oddly, after starting this email to you, I started writing about what has happened to me after my targeting started. I don't think I could have ever sat down and write all of this out if it wasn't for my enormous respect that I have for you and my gratitude towards you for being so kind to me and so many others. This is the longest email I have probably ever written, and that is absolutely true. I'm not going to be able to read it all. It's 37 pages long. Okay, 37 pages. I thank you for being a person, setting a good example for what is truly meant to have integrity and courage. There are so many people that admire you. Therefore, you have made others feel courageous enough to tell about the heinous crimes that have been done to them also. And for anybody that's new to my channel that's listening, Karen Stewart is a retired NSA intelligence analyst. She worked there for 28 years and then became targeted. You are far more powerful outside the NSA than you probably were inside the NSA. The one thing they couldn't take from you is the one thing they wanted to strip you of most. That is the love in your heart that you have for those in humanity that are good. They also couldn't take your soul. Even when times have been bad for you, you found the strength to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and try again to expose the filth that has been done to you and so many others. So anyway, this is how the email I started to you and ended up almost writing a novel. And yes, 37 pages, Karen, is just about a novel. But let me tell you something about Karen. She can type like crazy. Her typing speed, I think she told me, I don't know if it was 90 or 100 words a minute. She can type. It's off the charts. As soon as you said the travel office, I remembered it wasn't HR, but the travel office, since you were right across the parking lot from the NSA security. This allowed you to see the stalkers. I see this part of the abuse you have endured as a silver lining and a darker cloud over the NSA. You should not have been stripped of your security clearance. There are so many, particularly at the FBI, who have top security clearances, and they are disgustingly corrupt. And I just want to say something about Karen. When she would write on my channel anything about the FBI, she would always use lowercase letters. And she says, I will always type the lowercase letters to piss them off. Well, in this testimony, this affidavit, they're all uppercase letters. The FBI is notorious for relying on others' opinions about a person. I like to use this analogy here in Idaho. If you are a Mormon, you have a better chance of being hired somewhere. This is not to put down Mormons. However, I'm disgusted by the fact that many of them listen to the stupid lies and take part in stalking. But that could also be Catholics and other religions as well. Anyway, here is my analogy of what goes on in Idaho. Jim Bob may have a second cousin whose name is Joe Bob, and Jim Bob suggests who he works for to hire Joe Bob. Do you know what happens, Karen? Joe Bob is usually not at all qualified for the job, and he may be corrupt. But because Jim Bob, who doesn't know his head from his ear's end, says Joe Bob is their man, Joe Bob then gets hired. Unfortunately, the many qualified, decent, honest people who apply for the same job are turned down. They don't do much about nepotism here, and if you're a Mormon, you got a shoe in. And I just want to say for the record, these are not my words. This is an affidavit written by the now deceased Karen Romero, also known as Goodness 8. She would often get on Derek Robinson's conference call And when Neil and Skizit had their conference call, she would be frequently on there as Goodness8 in the chat. So I am reading an affidavit that Karen gave to me, Karen Romero gave to me in 2018. It was her testimony written to Karen Stewart, retired NSA intelligence analyst. I have written to him countless times. I know he helps his Mormon friends out, but he should be unbiased. They should have to wait in line like everybody else. The truth is, humanity does this far too much. I would like to think if I had a position as an attorney general, I would be fair, or at least as fair as a human being can be. When I take care of patients, and Karen was a nurse, a registered nurse, by the way, when I take care of patients, I try to be that same way. We have prisoners sometimes, and no one really wants to take care of them. I will do this because I ask myself, and truly ask myself, how would Jesus handle this? He would set aside anything negative that he knew about the patient, and he would proceed with caring for the patient in the best possible way. A woman I work with saw me give an extra juice and an extra breakfast bar to a prisoner one day. I do this because if they miss a meal at the prison, they will not feed the prison until the next meal rolls around. It doesn't matter to the prison if the person just had surgery and has been without food and drink since midnight. This woman told me to not do it because she had looked up on the computer to see his crime. I told her it was none of my business knowing what he did or didn't do. My job is to take care of him after surgery. She didn't violate anything by looking him up on the computer because it's a public site, but what he did or didn't do... Wait. She didn't do anything by looking up on the computer because it's a public site, but what she did was totally unethical. Yet when I think of that day, I think I too would have been judgy. But I like to think that I am that way. It's for a good reason. I have received so much divine help over the past 30 years as an RN. I believe it's due to the fact that I have prayed for patients, not just for myself. I have seen miracles happen, and I am glad I prayed for certain patients that were in dire need of prayer. More about the Mormons. I don't stereotype all Mormons, just the ones that are gang stalkers. In fact, you might say I stereotype all gang stalkers. They are low-life thugs. I have also had the honor of working with some really qualified, wonderful Mormons. I work with an RN now who is absolutely wonderful. She doesn't take shortcuts. She manages to stay out of gossip. She is our infection control nurse, and I have not seen her waver from doing the right thing. She sets a good example for the rest of us, and I just love working with her. So what you've got there is a very good Mormon that is very qualified for any job that she would ever apply for in the nursing field. The patients absolutely love her. So it isn't the Mormons, but it's about some people are simply corrupt and disgusting. By the way, she's not the friends I told you about that is gang stalked, who is also wonderful to work with. I say wow, just wow, on the fact that you were tenacious enough to stay another 2.5 years after being targeted. And I thought I was tenacious. I had been working at a hospital in Las Vegas for 7 years when targeting started in 2004. Anyway, that I was aware of. I only lasted another 8 months and I finally quit. Karen, I think you should get some kind of Purple Heart for lasting as long as you did while being targeted. I'm so glad you found a good psychologist. I truly believe God protects you so very much. It may not seem like it at times, but I keep seeing silver linings in what has happened to you. However, the injustices that you have endured is unfathomable and certainly inexcusable. I just despise injustices. And in my case, it is difficult at times looking for the silver linings. I can still see those silver linings with others. But as for me, I have to look really hard. And I still try to be grateful. I truly believe the way to God's grace is being grateful even in the bad times. And as you know, being targeted is bad times indeed. My prayers have always been heard and answered rather quickly, except for the prayer to have this stopped. Has taken a considerable amount of time. It is being stopped, but not as fast as I would like. I think of how many years this has gone on, and some days I'm so angry at Jesus. Of course, that is what the evil ones want. They want everyone on this planet to lose faith. Knowing that, I simply say, not this time are they getting away with this. I have to remind myself that they are not more powerful than the Blessed Mother and Jesus. Sure, they have some pretty powerful technology, but because they have used it in evil ways, they can't even discern their heads from their backsides. Their souls are so fragmented, and some of them are no longer have a soul at all. And that said, being targeted can also fragment a person's soul. This is caused from the day-to-day trauma. I have prayed many times and asked God to please find my lost soul parts, cleanse them, and reintegrate them back to me. He does do this for me, and I am most grateful for his help. Tonight I went to a party. My boss had a summer party. Her parties are so lovely. And her husband is right along her side, helping to entertain the guests. Both of them love to entertain, and they have a beautiful big backyard. It was 72 degrees here, and for the first time in a long time, I actually felt normal. Whatever normal is anymore. The only shielding I had on was an EMF prevention pendant, but I had a similar one of these before I even knew about targeting. So tonight, everyone was pleasant, and many of the doctors I work with were also there. I really like most of the doctors I work with. Most of the staff came, and many of them brought their children. I felt good, like I used to feel before targeting. I was so grateful to feel normal again. Usually I can't wait to get out of work parties, but at her house, I don't feel like this. Although the bastards kept me from being employed as an RN for 2 years, 9 months, and 5 days. Now I have an RN job again, and a boss that I love. I believe Jesus said at one time, and I am paraphrasing, think on those things that are good and turn away from bad thoughts. That's easier said than done. I recently heard on one of those TI calls that a woman said that she was grateful for the targeting and crimes that have been done to her because she's now stronger. Then she went on to say that the perps were mind-controlled and targeted too, and how she feels so sorry for them. Well, I'm sure not grateful for the targeting that has been done to me, and I don't even see being grateful for this abuse, but I am grateful that I'm still alive and so often divinely protected. And as for being thankful to dirtbags for this abhorrent behavior, that is crazy thinking. I think it's masochistic to be grateful to these maniacs. Besides, they have stolen so much from me. They didn't even have that right. What I mean by that is they intended to have, in fact, attempted to take free will from me, take free will from others, and in the process lost their own free will. They are energy-stealing, low-life thieves that are good-for-nothing vampires. They attempt to steal people's money, people's personal belongings, people's health, and the worst thing they attempt to steal is another person's soul. The pedos are the worst. They steal the innocence of children, and they SA children to Lucifer to help them out more. This is unfathomable to me. In my not-so-humble opinion, they are the scum of the earth, the takers of the earth. They are truly maniacal. There is no way that I'm grateful to anyone like this. That said, as difficult as the last several years have been, I am grateful for the fact that I have tried to do the right thing, but I'm sure not grateful for the crimes that have been done to me. And personally, I believe that anyone that is grateful for the targeting abuse is indicative of Stockholm Syndrome. And by the way, I agree with what you said about the lie detector test. Absolutely agree with the fact that psychopaths can lie, and the tests show that they're telling the truth. Oh, that's true. Maybe that's why they're not admissible in courts, or maybe they are now. So many things have changed. This might have changed also. Remember, this is written December 2018. A lot of my stuff was happening to me around the same time as when the targeting started for her back in 2004. It may have started before that, but I was aware of the targeting in 2004. My marriage was falling apart due to black magic being used by his girlfriend, the whore. He left me October 7, 2003 with a note on the kitchen counter. He filed for divorce without telling me. After he left is when I discovered all that stuff about the property deed tampering. My dad was being built out of money at the same time from a woman that was much younger than him. She was my age. The HCA corporate hospital that I worked at told me to do Medicare fraud and didn't respond favorably when I said no, without a moment's hesitation. My computer charting was being tampered with at work because the lunatic director of the OR had every staff person's password. And she gave it to OR secretary to get into each nurse's charts to change the times patients entered the recovery room. They had been dinged by a joint commission inspector because the times didn't correlate correctly. Of course, every clock had a different time. Some nurses used their watches, some nurses used the wall clock. The computer program was a medical program, not done through the internet. And I don't recall the computer that even had a visible clock on it that we could use. I put down the time I actually received the patient, not the time to correlate with anesthesia's time. Only part of the record that could be changed was the actual nurse's notes. The rest of the chart had a place for vital signs, about 5 pages of a check-off flow sheet. I got called into lunatic OR director's office and told I shouldn't write nurses' notes and to only chart on the check-off flow chart. Mind you, in every job I had prior to this, I had glowing reviews on my documentation and how thorough I was. Not only was my charting messed with, but now the lunatic director was telling me what I could chart and what I couldn't chart. This was not my first rodeo, and she was totally out of line telling me this. And at this point, I was very concerned. It was also concerning that if someone had a nurse's password, they could easily delete the documentation on the flowcharts and put in anything they wanted. Well, guess what? Karen isn't the only nurse that reported on this. Kim Straub, who's no longer with us, was also a nurse in Tennessee. And the same very thing happened to her. Amazing, huh? Wow. And this is going back to 2004. At this point, I was very concerned. The only part of the chart they could not delete, was the nurse's notes. As you can imagine, I wrote a lot of nurses' notes. Good thing I type fast. I brought my concerns up at staffing meetings. My coworkers didn't think it was that big of a deal. I explained when we used to do charting on a hard copy prior to using the computer, it would be like somebody taking a bottle of whiteout and writing something else in. And if that were the case, it would be easy to identify it was someone else's writing and that it had been tampered with, but with a computer, it wouldn't be as easy to see the tampering. I'm aware of computer forensics, but what if the forensics person is corrupt? What if that person is so corrupt that he listens to or is threatened by the FBI to not get involved? What if that person then decides to say no wrongdoing found, even when they did find wrongdoing? And remember, this is the testimony of the now deceased Karen Romero. Goodness 8. Another thing that happened there, when the computers would go down, we documented on a hard copy chart to later be retyped into the computer. Instead, each one of us transcribing our own hard copy in the computer. The director gave this assignment to one person who also had all of our passwords. So not only did the director have our passwords, the secretary and OR nurse also had our passwords. This was a big concern to me due to the fact that this person really had a vendetta of sorts against me. She was also the type of person that would do what some of the perps do. Looking back on this, maybe she really was a perp. She's the type that would be a dream come true future employee for one of those corrupt fusion centers. Oh my goodness. I expressed my concern about her transcribing the hard copies under my password. I expressed if a mistake was made during transcribing, it would appear in a courtroom as my mistake, not hers. There really was no screen on this particular computer charting program for her to write that it was transcribed by her. Even if that was the case, she would destroy the hard copy after transcribing the hard copy. I asked if the hard copies would be saved, because she's a human being, sort of, and humans can make mistakes. If mistakes are made, I'm sure I don't want to be responsible for someone else's mistakes. I didn't bring up the fact that she's the type of person to sabotage anyone that she didn't like, not just me either. I simply questioned the legality of what was being done, and since it is my nursing license, I do have a responsibility to protect that. Again, my coworkers were in la-la land and didn't see my concerns. Most of them liked me, so it wasn't that. It was like they were in some kind of trance and rather robotic. They simply could not relate with what I was saying. Many things done at this hospital were illegal or unethical. Not only that, I knew if the hospital were dinged for these illegalities, they certainly wouldn't be accountable. What they would probably do is throw any RN under the bus. This place was a real zoo at times. The doctors would get away with being verbally abusive to nurses and start yelling and swearing at the nurse station as patients and visitors walked by. One surgeon came up to the nurse's station and started yelling, wanting to know who was the nurse assigned to this patient. He said, "Go get her because I intend to put my foot up her ass." Oh my God. A few patients and family members had walked by and heard this. The patients were scared enough as it is, but hearing this sort of thing may make them more scared. 3 of us put together an incident report on him doing this. Guess what? The risk manager said she never got the report. I think someone threw it in the trash or shredded the report. The same surgeon and an anesthesiologist were in OR one day. The patient was asleep on the table. They started a water balloon fight by filling up gloves with water. The surgery was over and the patient was due to come to recovery room, but still under the effects of anesthesia. The anesthesiologist was waiting for the patient to at least wake up enough to be intubated. They were finished with their water balloon fight, so the surgeon thought that they were done. So he went to get out of his scrubs and get dressed to go to the other hospital. This is all hearsay because, thank God, I had the day off that day. But the information came from some other reliable sources that I knew how this surgeon was. Anyway, the anesthesiologist wanted one last throw at the surgeon. So he did, and apparently got his suit wet. The surgeon was done playing in his inappropriate, disgusting game. But obviously the anesthesiologist was not done. So the patient gets extubated and wheeled to recovery room. In the meantime, the surgeon is really angry and follows the anesthesiologist into recovery. And after the patient is delivered to the nurse, the surgeon comes over to the anesthesiologist and starts to choke him. He broke his gold chain around his neck while choking him, and bleeding occurred. At this point, the anesthesiologist got smart and didn't fight back. He took this until the nurses broke it up. This all happened in the recovery room, where patients were waking up. And one patient was actually awake, ready to be transported back to his room. That patient made note to the CNA, who transported him of how he felt about all that he just had seen. I'm sure, as you can imagine, he was none too happy. One of the nurses called the CEO, who then came to the recovery room pretty fast. He was a very good PR type person and knew how to calm down the doctors, but nothing really was done about crap like this. That is exactly why some of the doctors kept doing their inappropriate behavior. Once in a while, they would get a little metaphoric slap on the wrist, but nothing serious. Anyway, CEO man arrives before the surgeon leaves. You know what the surgeon said to the CEO? Quote, "You're not going to write this up, are you, Mark?" Unquote. I don't know if the CEO ever reported this or not. Another anesthesiologist would often rant and rave about how inept the nurses were. At the same time, OR started using recovery rooms' narcotic box to lock up the cocaine used in OR. I asked why we had to count their cocaine too. Because they have their own narcotic box. This is what I was told. There had been some missing coca, and they didn't know what was happening to it. Their answer to this problem was to remove it so it wouldn't be stolen anymore and have recovery room babysit the CC. The temporary Band-Aid fix, you ask me, lo and behold, it was the anesthesiologist, the one that frequently called the nurses inept. That was the CC thief. Apparently he had an addiction to CC. You know what kind of job he had before he became an anesthesiologist? Long pause. He was actually a cop. Probably a cop that was addicted to CC, and he knew the way to get it easier was to become an anesthesiologist. Bad enough he allegedly put adult patients in jeopardy, but this guy did most of his anesthesiology cases on small people, kiddos. Here's a good one. Many of the nurses oftentimes stood on the outside of the nurses' station to do their charting. There wasn't a lot of chairs to sit down. After all, they didn't want the slaves sitting down, so we were lined up doing our charting, and this one surgeon liked to slap the nurses' butts. Oh my goodness, we're going on to this now. I don't know if I could deal with this. I was the one on the end, and he walked by slapping the nurse on the butt. They each said, "Ew, ew, ew," as he went down the line slapping butts. And then when he approached me, I gave him a look like, "Don't even think about it." He looked at me and said, "Just walk on by." I said, "Good." He knew I was upset about his behavior, and he walked off rather sheepishly. No way would I have allowed him to slap me on the butt. Here's another good one. The guy under the CEO, I've forgotten what his actual title is, so I shall call him Mr. Stupid. Often emailed every one of the nurses with bizarre stuff and he did this frequently. He started out slow by saying, whoever was putting paper towels in the toilets better stop doing this. Then he progressed to an email telling us who we were to vote for in the upcoming election. Oh my goodness. Oh, here's another good one. He added an addition to the recovery room to make room for more patients, recovery patients. Lots of construction was involved in this. When it was finally finished, some of us were assigned to patient bays in the new part. So now I was working down in the new part of recovery. It smelled really bad, like some kind of sewer problem. The smell didn't go away and in fact seemed to get worse. I said we really need to discuss this with maintenance. So we discussed this with many maintenance employees, and each one of them lied to our faces and said, "We don't smell anything." This was not a faint smell, Karen. It was really bad. Patients after waking up even noticed this. None of us believed that the maintenance department didn't smell this, and so we were told. The CEO, he couldn't magically smell this. Yeah, right. I don't know how the new addition passed the building inspection, but this was in Las Vegas, so a payoff may have been done. Well, we just had to contend with this horrible smell for a few months. Then guess what happened? The upper floor caved in one day when I was working in pre-op. Pre-op and the recovery room are next to each other, and I worked both places. SHIT literally started pouring down from the hole in the upper floor. It was raining. It was literally raining shit. No kidding. Lots of it too. I shouldn't be laughing. The smell was horrible. The patients in pre-op started to complain. A maintenance person came right up. Oh, wait. Oh, my goodness. Let me just see. I just scrolled up completely. 1 second. I was on page 9. 1 second. 1 second. It just scrolled right back up to the beginning. Do you think for 1 minute these slimy, greedy bastards closed down surgery for a while to get this cleaned up? Nope. They did not. Day surgery patients often went from recovery back to pre-op to be discharged in pre-op. I had just gotten a patient ready for discharge and had to wheel her out of a wheelchair through large amounts of shit on the floor. After getting through the shit part, I had to clean up the wheels of the wheelchair and my shoes so as to not track it through the rest of the hospital. All the time, sincerely apologizing to the patient for the problem. All this because they didn't want to deal with the sewer problem. They wanted to pretend there was no problem. I kept telling them this is a sewer issue. But do you think they cared? No, they did not. The silver lining here is, after they fixed the problem that occurred that day, the smell went away in the new part of the recovery room. And I'm going to end here because she goes on and on. The next one is about a gastroenterologist, and this is page 11, in case I don't remember. Page 11 of Karen Romero's affidavit to retired NSA intelligence analyst Karen Stewart. And it was sent to me in 2018 to save in case anything ever happened to her. So rest in peace, Karen. You will definitely be missed. She passed just before her 70th birthday, which was November 17th. And I'm going to end here.